What would you do? Asked to remove the camera and solar flame light on the structure of a home that's been there for 2 years. Curious of what you would do. Do I just remove what they asked and place it in another area inside the home without saying a word? Or do I remove it, place it inside the home, and then send them an email back saying what you asked to remove has been done? However, please note that whatever neighbor complained about this obviously thought it was there for the wrong intention, and it was not. I am not using it to watch or spy on neighbors. It's there for security purposes because, and then tell them why, I guess the association feels my safety isn't a concern and so on. Generally speaking, I've had almost no issues with the association the last 15 years that I've been here. I cause no problems and mean no harm to anyone. Here's what went down. I got an email yesterday from my HOA that basically said I had to remove a security camera and a solar light on the outside of my home. It's a 1.2 watt solar flame light and not a floodlight. And I have a ton of decorations out for Halloween, and I usually decorate for the holidays. These pieces they want removed have been there for 2 years now, no problems. My camera is pointed to a walking path that is right next to my porch, with a few other townhouses in the background in the distance. I've had some issues with strangers coming around in the evening, jumping on my patio after 10 p.m., knocking on my door and ringing the doorbell and running. Hence the camera, since I get concerned someone may take something or try to rob me. It is not a Ring doorbell, but is a Blink camera. It's not an eyesore. I wanted some security and some lighting there because it was dark. So I asked them to send me some rules and regulations so I can see them, and they sent me this gem from 2008, right when I moved into the townhouse. According to them, no floodlights or any other electrical or mechanical devices may be installed to or installed to any portion of the common and limited elements at any time, except as may be provided below. So I still don't know what the below is, as it's not in the document, but it is the reason for it because we are preserving the economic and aesthetic value of our community. Also, they threatened to charge me $25 per day if I don't remove them. They sent me a picture of the specific camera and the light in question. I have others there too, so I'm surprised they didn't take pictures of those. First off, I think the rule is BS. My safety is more important than the aesthetic of the outside of the home. Because I know this is a fight that I won't win, I'll be seeking alternative methods of security that are not against the rules and regulations. Secondly, what possesses an association to come around and check on these things? This couldn't be a random check, could it? Should I suspect a neighbor complained of something, maybe my over-the-top amazing decorations, so they came around to check it out and got me on something else instead? Actually, I'm almost more certain now that a certain neighbor complained because her and her daughter have been walking around my home for years now. Their home is not visible to me or my camera. They just walk the path. I caught them the past 2 days looking directly at my camera, and they even said, "Is that a spy camera?" when looking at it. Apparently, that's new to them despite being there for the last 2 years in plain sight. My neighbor saw the lady a couple of weeks ago creeping around my home and told her that she was from the association and she was just there to admire my Halloween decorations. She lied. Now I do have a partial physical disability, so safety is even more of a concern for me over aesthetics. More info. Move the camera inside. That's how my security cameras are installed. That way nobody knows they're there. I'm not in an HOA. That's just my choice. That's pretty much what I'll be doing. Oh, and instead of leaving dimmer flame lights out on the structure, I'll get highly bright solar lights staked to the ground for the walkway in front of my home. I'm not ruining anything with that one. When the HOA Karen messes with your safety and you have a disability, how would you handle it? HOA isn't even a legal entity, posted by Immediate Ad 7638 with an update. Hello friends. Hubs and I just bought 10 acres in northern Michigan. It's part of an HOA that has maybe 15 lots, and only 8 of them have any homes. It's a rural area. I'm writing here because I'm beginning to think the HOA is not even a legal entity, and they're just charging us annual dues and pocketing it, and I'm not sure what to do. Here are my red flags. Firstly, it's run by a husband and a wife, no third person. Michigan law requires 3 people on the board of an HOA. Secondly, I've emailed this husband and wife team asking for these documents, and they have become unresponsive. The best response that I got was that they sent me the building restrictions list, but no governing documents. All my other questions were replied to in a friendly and helpful manner, but they completely ignore my request for articles of incorporation. So I also cannot find this HOA on the Secretary of State's website, which is the legal directory of all the HOAs in the state, which also has all the founding documents for all the HOAs included on the site. I can find the neighboring HOA, but not mine. Michigan law says that all HOAs have to have an annual meeting, keep minutes, and vote for new board members and so on. This HOA hasn't had a formal meeting in years. They actually said that in the annual newsletter. Now, since there were 2 new property owners in the community, they decided to have a meeting, which I couldn't attend because I work Sundays. When I asked for the minutes, I was told it was just a get-to-know-you casual thing, and there were no minutes. Dues are only $50 a year. However, there is literally nothing the HOA does for the community. There's no public easements or parks, there's zero HOA maintenance on anything in the community, and the snowplow doesn't even plow the street that I'm building on. We even have to hook up our own electric, septic, and well. Now, there is a single official document in the library of the county, but all that it has are building restrictions like rules about fences and siding and so on. But there is literally nothing else legal, official, or otherwise that I can find about this HOA. I did have to write the dues check to HOA name, but that's the only indication I have that it's a legal business. They have to have a business bank account and legally registered business to cash that check. Since the husband and wife and the directors and members of the board will not respond to my request for documentation, I'm considering my next steps. Here's what I'm thinking to do. Would love thoughts and opinions. I'm going to begin documenting all my requests for documentation. Now, it's been via email, so it's already documented and considered a request in writing. Next up, I'm going to send a registered letter formally requesting this documentation. Then I'm going to file a formal complaint with the Secretary of State, which governs HOAs and handles complaints in Michigan. I'm going to get a real estate attorney to force these documents and/or to secede from the HOA due to lack of compliance with all the legal procedures. I don't like the idea of stirring the pot with this HOA, as the husband and wife are our neighbors adjoining our acreage. But A, hubby and I are hermits and don't care if people do or don't like us, and B, this husband and wife team are already becoming sour to us due to lack of response. Where does our money go? There was even a recreational easement on our deed, and the HOA didn't know where it was. We paid out of our own pockets to have our surveyor find and mark the easement. It is overgrown with mature trees and overgrowth and not accessible at all. Update. It looks like there's also a rider at the end of the library that describes the parcels and requires a majority vote to change any restrictions. It looks like it's completely legal. You've helped me tremendously. But now, I'm even more confused about where the money goes. I guess it doesn't matter since I'm legally bound and $50 a year is nothing really. Thank you so much for all your help. Even though the HOA is clearly not following Michigan HOA law as far as meetings and budgets, it's not worth the $50 a year to fight and to get everyone ticked when it's all legit on some level anyways. Uncle lives near an HOA, posted by Blood Bunny 656 with a bonus story. So my uncle bought a piece of land and built his house on it. Several years later, several houses were made around him and an HOA was formed. He never joined it because he hated the idea of HOAs. The whole problem started when my uncle saw several kids playing in his backyard. Now, my uncle has 7 dogs. 2 are bloodhounds, 1 was a pit bull, and the rest were mutts. So he was worried that the kids might get bitten by a dog. So he built a fence around the border of his land, and it took him 3 days to finish. However, the day after he finished, he gets a fine from the HOA for building the fence without the permission of the HOA. He ignores it since he is not part of the HOA and the fence is on his land and was not breaking rules. A week later, someone from the HOA comes to talk to him about the fence, and he says he is not paying the fine because he's not part of the HOA. And then he explains why he built the fence. The HOA apparently thought he had 1 dog and not 7. My uncle says goodbye, thinking that they had come to an agreement that the fence was fine. But my uncle would paint it, which he'd already planned to do, he had just not gotten around to it. The next day, however, he gets several fines, one of which was for his dogs and another was for the fence that he again ignored. Several days later, he buys 2 white paint cans and starts to paint the fence. However, while he is doing it, several people that lived there walked by. Some said hi, others just glared at him as they walked on by. He paid them no mind, and after a while, several people from the HOA came by to complain about the color he chose. He didn't understand what was wrong. After all, it was white, so he asked what was wrong with it. And they said they didn't approve him building the fence, yet alone painting it. And they proceeded to say that he has to tear down the whole fence by the end of the week and then request for permission to build the fence again. He refuses and says again that he was not part of the HOA. This turns into an argument where his dogs are brought up, and by the end of it, they were threatening his dogs. By this point, there was a small crowd gathering and watching, so my uncle calms himself down, picks up his paint, and goes back home. 3 days later, while he was still walking around the inside of his fence, he finds several pieces of bacon covered in a white powder. When he picked them up, he realized they smelled like a chemical, and he realized that someone was trying to poison his dogs. Getting super ticked, he installs several cameras around the fence to find out who it was, and he actually gets them on camera one night. So he goes to the HOA meeting that was happening next month, but when he gets there, it turned out that the person trying to poison his dogs was the HOA president, who I will call Karen. He hadn't even met her until then. He still showed the video and even brought some of the bacon as proof and said that if it continued, he would contact the police. After that, the bacon stopped being thrown into his yard and she was voted out and later moved somewhere else. It wasn't until a month after the Karen moved that he was told the kids he saw playing in his yard were the Karen's kids, and that since he built the fence, they had been complaining non-stop for months that they could no longer play there. And my uncle only didn't call the cops immediately because he had some bad run-ins with them when he was younger and didn't trust them to not screw him over. Holy cow, it's one thing to lie, HOA, but to poison the dogs as a president? Insane. There's a story in this comment and it's crazy. Lucky the Lurker says, if he doesn't want to call the cops, call a lawyer. Have the lawyer talk to the cops. Get an attorney and a no contact order. In most places, the offenders, the HOA, must reimburse legal fees. I had a similar issue with the HOA that formed next to my property. Here are some of the issues I had over the last 20 plus years with the HOA. They tried to force my membership. They tried to fine me for violations despite not being a member. They harassed my daughter on our property and once stopped her while driving through the HOA. Those involved got jail and a fine. They tried to block my access to my property by saying that the public road that goes through the HOA was private and said that I needed to join the HOA if I want to use the street. They towed vehicles legally parked on my property. They illegally used my property as a parking lot and community fair, causing damage to my field, including contaminated soil. The equipment leaked oil and the chemicals onto a field that I used to grow hay and graze my horses. They removed a portion of my fence to gain illegal access to the property and cut down several trees on my property without my permission. And then they would trespass multiple times. They'd violate a no contact order multiple times. They started with the demand to join, and I replied with a letter stating, I don't, and citing the law. They followed up with fines and demand letters, and I replied once via certified mail, restating that I'm not in the HOA and not legally required to join. Next notice I got from them, I called an attorney and let them handle it. They knocked on my door and harassed my daughter in our yard when I told them that I wasn't speaking to them to call my lawyer. After that, I have kept a no contact order in place for 20 plus years. We have gone this route every 5 to 7 years. New people join the board and forget that there's a no contact order, and every time they send me something, it just goes to my attorney and they get a letter, a copy of the no contact order, and a bill for his time. Sometimes they try to press issues with the lawyer and they always lose and have to pay the fees. For this reason, I hired the most expensive law firm I could find. Anytime they legitimately need to talk to me, paying the legal fees is worth it to not have to talk to the HOA. I haven't heard from the HOA for a few years, but I don't doubt I will again, so the no contact order stays in place. I do get along with people in that neighborhood despite several expensive assessments they've had to pay to cover the HOA screw-ups. I'm even friends with someone who's a board member at large, holds no office, just votes on new things. They remind new board members that they need to contact my lawyer. I am so sorry you got screwed like that, but I'm glad you got it in place to get them back when they try to get a hold of you against the rules. HOA moved in on my uncle, posted by Little Bit Evil. About 25 years ago, my aunt and uncle moved into a new construction single-family home neighborhood on a half an acre. About 6 months after they moved in, he was informed that his neighborhood was being taken over by an HOA. He disregarded his HOA application as he did not wish to join. Not long after this, random neighbors began complaining to him directly about his boat and the cars in his driveway, violating HOA rules. He just informed the often rude people that he was not a member, that they would argue with him that everyone was a member. One of the major issues is that his driveway, garage, and front yard was on the main level of his home, and the backyard dropped down a cliff to level with his basement and backyard. So he had no way to back his boat around the side of the home into the backyard. Eventually, the HOA began harassing him with threats if he didn't move his boat to the backyard. His backyard had been closed off by a vinyl fence. The HOA installed and lined another road back there. So one day, my uncle decided to compromise by trying to take down a section of his back fence so he could make a gate for boat parking access. The HOA called the police on him for destruction of property. The police left my uncle with a warning if the fence was returned to proper condition by the end of the day. Uncle put the fence back up and placed his boat back in the front driveway. Now the fines started coming, week after week, month after month. When the fines reached $10,000, the HOA filed a lawsuit against him. He countersued for the harassment and the street access to his backyard. In court, the HOA showed the HOA boundary and showed my uncle's house was in the middle of the HOA, explained the violations, and the police report filed over the back fence. My uncle explained that he never signed up for the HOA. He moved into the neighborhood before the HOA existed, never gave them permission to fence in his backyard, provided all mortgage documentation and a blank HOA application with the HOA security stamp and date. The HOA argued that it didn't matter if he didn't turn in his application because he was within the HOA's borders. The judge declared my uncle's property was grandfathered as private property and not part of the HOA. The HOA was to immediately take down their illegal fence on the back border of my uncle's lot. Since the HOA had fined my uncle $10,000 and more in illegal fines, my uncle was owed over $10,000 in damages for the harassment. My uncle rebuilt his yard fence in see-through chain link with a gate where he parks all his toys in full view. He moved the boat from the driveway to his front lawn, let the lawn die, and paved it over, all 10 feet from his front door to the sidewalk. The HOA neighbors in the decades since still approach him to complain, and he just tells them to take a walk, knowing there is nothing they can do to him. Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.